Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Standing room only. Wow. This is super cool. Thank you for joining the panel today. So today, what we're going to be talking about is taking your game from 0 to 1 million, and we are going to be spilling all kinds of secrets because we have a lot of great people who are going to help us understand their background and what they've done to do that. So first, I want to thank A16Z and AppsFlyer who are sponsoring the event. Thank you for having us and paying for us. Lot going on at Tech Week, so hopefully this will be one of the memorable moments for you all. So my goal here is to promise that you come away with at least one, if not 3, actionable insights that you can take with you. It's really important, I think, for all of us that you get something interesting out of this. And so here's what we're going to cover today. We have a lot on our plate. So we're going to start by kind of mapping out order of operations for how you grow your business. What's the roadmap? What's your strategy? How do you form a team? How do you think about your MarTech MVP? How do you think about when your game is ready? And then the most fun is like, what mistakes did you make and how do you not do that again? Because sometimes the best thing we can learn from is when other people fail, we learn how to not do that ourselves. So first off, let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Jen Donahoe. If my voice sounds familiar, I do a podcast called Deconstructor of Fun. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Actually, who listens to the podcast? Oh, shit. Okay, good. Thank you for coming. So thank you for coming. That's crazy all I do is sit in my office all day and do basically a Zoom call, and the fact that people listen it just continues to blow my mind. So thank you for coming. I'm also a marketing consultant, and my background actually is in marketing and growth, EA, Zynga, Riot, Scopely, so Cody and I actually have a little bit of a history together at Riot, which there's so many fun stories. Maybe after the panel we'll tell you some of those stories. All right, so let's get to, I'm going to do a quick intro for all of these guys. And so first is Doug McCracken. So he is the operating partner and he heads up marketing for games at A16Z. And what I love too is he's done we have a kind of a shared background, almost 20 years, Activision, Supercell, Riot too. So a lot of us have shared experience. So, marketing veteran here. So Cody Christie heads up growth in UA at Riot. What I would love for him to talk about, and he will share about, is how we set up UA for mobile at Riot and how he launched Valorant on console and PC. Because that's not easy to do, everybody, in this day and age, especially inside of Riot, where sometimes we joke that things are held together by duct tape and shoestring. And all the but you've made better duct tape since I left, right? Guys, you can laugh. I'm going to be a smart ass, so just get used to it. So Brian Murphy and we have known each other a really long time. So he heads up games and new product strategy, which he quoted to me as AI stuff, was your definition. And so he's at AppsFlyer, which is one of the leading MMPs for gaming. If you don't use them, you probably should be, because they have a ton of new products. Actually, I just shilled the hell out of you in the podcast that came out today. A lot of new features coming from them. And then finally, Matt Widdoes. I can't wait to grab him after the panel. He is a UA and growth leader who has worked at King and Zynga, leading those teams. So if there's somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about, it's going to be this guy. He now founded his own company called MAVAN, and he helps folks like you all. And so I will shill for him because I would for sure hire him and his company knowing what he knows. So he has a ton of great insights to share. All right. So with that, did I miss anything? All that good? Okay. So we're going to start at the beginning, and we're going to map out, how do you set up your roadmap? So this one's going to go to Cody first, because it's something that we had to do inside of Riot at the time. Is how do you approach the idea of even going after growth? How do you think about the team? Like, what is your order of operations as you hit this? Because actually, let me ask the audience, who here is a kind of a startup or an early age? Okay. Oh, okay. Super helpful to know. Who's kind of like got something middle of the road? You got a game in the middle. Okay, some of you. And then who is firing all cylinders and you're kicking ass and you don't even need to listen to us? See, nobody. Okay. All right. All right. So that's good for us to know that there, a lot of like folks at the beginning of the journey and the middle of the journey. So this is why this is helpful. So tell me a little bit about order of operations.
Yeah. So from the growth side, and again, just talking from the Riot side of being relatively large, I'll try and tailor this down to what I would also still do back when I was in smaller startup time, is making sure that the growth team early on is actually really involved with product, not in a directive way where they're telling product what to do, but so that they are extraordinarily aware of what the product will be, because marketing strategies start forming really, really early, and you want to have a very authentic vision of your game presented to future players, or your app if you're not doing games, and making sure that as they're building out the core game, you understand it. But then along the way, they need to build out their monetization mechanics, their retention mechanics, and all of those are things that a growth team is going to be deeply interested in and probably want to be able to actually give best practices and feedback on. And then once you get closer to launch, you obviously have your open betas or early accesses, areas where you want to start testing audience strategies. That is a core growth area, right? That's your A/B testing lab. So any weird creative idea you have, let people who aren't marketers have creative ideas. You might actually have one of your best creative strategies come from a random dev on the team because they live and breathe it. Like, don't keep it so close that no one else can come in. You will get really good ideas from random places, and just share your learnings really rapidly with more teams than you think. So like, get as many people in the forum in the company as you can so they know what's going on, because more eyes, in my opinion, has been better than siloing it with people who are very talented in what they do, SMEs, but have a very specific lens that they look at things through. So I just like democratizing it as much as possible, as early as possible.
Nice. Doug, I think you have this is what you do all day long, right? Is focus on this audience, the startup community. How have you been approaching helping them think about this roadmap, or, first let's do A, then B, then C?
Yeah, I'll start very early. Venture capitalists like to talk about product market fit. And so it's really important, I think, number one, that you're not going to be able to market your way out of a product that's not working. And so you have to build a product that's great before you start to invest in scale. And then ultimately, you need to help that product in your earlier phase through play tests, through closed alpha, through open beta, soft launch, really trying to figure out who's your audience and how can you actually find that audience, and then make sure that you're confident that you can scale. And I think it's a really important process you need to go through to really make sure that you have the understanding of your retention and all the metrics that you need to really grow.
Nice. Matt, from a kind of a people perspective of thinking about order of operations, what do you see?
Yeah, I think everybody always talks about how great the people are and how important that is, but I think one key thing that is often missed, especially early as you're building, but it plays on for forever, is that you can get like the 5 best basketball players on the planet and put them on a team and have a not great team. So like, you need to make sure that everybody's really aligned, and that they are cooperative and care more about the baby than they do what they're doing. I always joke that like, I want to hire the kids that sold candy in elementary school. It's like, I want them to be entrepreneurial. I want them to take ownership. I want them to be bringing ideas. And then the other piece, I think, on the team side is making sure that you set a vision. You don't need to spend a lot of time on this. It could be a 2-day exercise, but set your 10-year vision so you can map to a 3-year, so you can map to a 1-year, so you can map to the quarters that are going to get you to that. And then make sure everyone's held accountable and drive towards that. Remain flexible. And then I think from the early testing stuff, you want to do stress tests. This may not be new, but you want to stress test the tech at some point and make sure, through lower cost countries with paid, you can get feedback really quickly, and then get into monetization and really more retention testing in Western markets. But I would warn everybody that everybody wants to go after Canada and Australia and New Zealand and UK, and those are very expensive. So find a country where you can test consistently and have impact over time on many different games, and I can get more feedback another time.
Nice. Can I ask the audience too, who is working on a mobile game? Raise your hand. Okay. A lot of mobile. Who is PC? Okay. Console? PC console combined. So sometimes they're separate. Okay. So PC console combined, maybe it's so a little half mobile, half PC. So as we answer, it was good to know, sometimes some of us work very mobile centric, some of us work very PC centric, and so it'll be good for us to kind of understand a little bit of those differences. One of the things that I noticed in order of operations was when I was at Riot, I think you actually gave me this nickname, Professor Jen, is I had to go around educating, especially leadership, around what does growth even mean? What is UA? What is needed? What is MarTech? I don't know how many times I had to answer the question is what is MarTech? And so I would also say don't forget about just education and doing that in a way as to not insult the intelligence of the people that you are speaking to. It was a very delicate rope I had to walk of how do I explain these concepts, which are very basic to many of you in the room, but to many people, especially of an older generation who grew up in a different era of gaming, don't quite know that. And so that's pretty important as well. So let's get a little bit more into team, and we started to hit on it a little bit. When you're just starting to build out your marketing and publishing team, who would be your MVP? Like, who is your first hire? In all transparency, Cody was my first hire when I was like literally sitting in this chair and I was like, oh shit, I have to build a UA team. Like that's how I did it. For me was to find someone who had the SME, as you said, the expertise to come in who I could work with and trust. So what about you? Who has been your, how have you paid it forward?
I have a very specific answer to this, and it's a data scientist. And if you can, pair it with a data engineer, and a data scientist will tell you why you should pair them with a data engineer. But having them there early to make sure that LTV models, predictive churn models, all these different things exist for a growth team to do their absolute best work was by far the best decision, and I would do it again every single time. That comes, again, from a point of luxury of having a big enough company that had a game that was already running. I wasn't starting with, just some seed money and something like that. I had Riot as a backer for that. So obviously do that to what you can afford. But if you can get a data scientist in early, please do it. It's so effective.
Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I would also, funny enough, say data. I mean, it underlies everything that you do. Ultimately, games are data that are disguised with art, and that the math there really matters. And everything you're going to be dealing with, from retention to paid unit economics to economy and time in session, all these other things will come back to the data. So if that is broken and so many people kind of patchwork that early, that's a huge problem. And then I would also say like UX is really important early. The investment there will make a big difference. And sometimes your data person can run paid, sometimes your UX person can run the creative. So I think the only other thing I'd say there is that I think there's this challenge with early stage where you're limited with capital. So you end up hiring like 3 generalists. You get like a marketing generalist, a product generalist, an engineering generalist, and sometimes you're just doing everything for equity. And I would strongly recommend against that. I think the path for that is actually start with specialists, find a way to get them engaged. Don't hire a full-time anybody if you can avoid it, and then get that built enough to where it warrants a full-time data scientist forever, ever, and then do that. But you're going to end up with generalist quality on a bunch of stuff that really requires specialization if you don't do that. That's probably it.
Yeah. Brian, I think one of the interesting things is I often tap you. Vendors are kind of a helpful part of the extended team. Do you find that sometimes you're almost like an extended team member because you get the call of, hey, can you help me with this? Like I think I've tapped you to come talk to some other folks on my behalf of, they're not listening to me, so maybe they're going to listen to Brian because he knows everybody.
I know a few people. But I think like marketing, to be frank, as I've been in this space a while now and I've really kind of honed in on it with folks around here, sometimes you don't realize what you provide to the market is as valuable as you think it is. But frankly, what AppsFlyer does, and the companies that are in the ecosystem, like engagement tools, CRM, cost tools, you kind of forget like what your purpose is in some cases. And you, as a vendor, when you sell things to people, you're a salesperson. Let's be honest here. Nobody wants to hear from me, or maybe they do. Who knows? But you are kind of an extension of a really critical discipline of a company. And so it actually, for me, it's been really refreshing to be able to sell a product and, create value and really know that like your technology is mission critical. Marketing folks that are here, a lot of them I know can't do their job without what we do. And that's a really, really positive and kind of liberating kind of feeling to have. And then it's not even to Jen's point, it's not even questions about the technology that we might provide. It's also like, what insights can you offer that I don't know right now that you guys have access to that you can give me in an appropriate way? What people do you know that we can hire? Because we know everybody basically. So in a lot of cases, our customers do feel like we're an extension of their own arm. Frankly, Supercell used to tell us this all the time. And that was like pretty amazing statement to make, and one that really is gratifying when somebody that, frankly, obviously Doug holds a lot of gratitude and love to, but everybody else here has a lot of respect for. And when somebody makes a statement like that, it's pretty powerful for us, and it really makes us want to do our job as well as we can.
Doug, what about you? I think you think that there's a little bit more, as a generalist, and you're a generalist as well. What about the integration between these MVPs that you hire and the product team? Like, how do you see that kind of being a key to this puzzle?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, the marketer needs to work extremely well with the product team, play the product, play the game, really understand the audience, who are they going after, understand the vision, and be able to build their marketing vision around the actual game vision. I mean, it sounds obvious, but there are so many teams that operate separately, and you need to make sure that you're integrated from day one, getting buy-in on everything that you're doing. And ultimately, yeah, I have a generalist background. I think that typically startups will tend to hire obviously a doer, number one, the most important thing I think in startups, but someone who can do a lot of different things, wear a lot of hats. But depending on the type of product you have, you're going to want someone that can actually go deep in the area of marketing that's most important for that product to help them grow over time.
Yeah, so let me stay with you on this one, which is brand. One of the things that I think is a secondary for many of you is, we'll figure out the brand later on. Who cares what it looks like? So why is it important to actually think about brand early on?
I think that a lot of people also, when they think of brand, they think of a splashy advertising campaign that costs a lot of money. That's brand marketing. That's a form of promotion. The way I think about brand is holistic. The product is part of the brand. The community, everything everyone's saying on the web, including your friends, your colleagues, is all part of the brand. And so, really starting at the very beginning, I like to think about this idea, especially for startups, of developing a minimal viable brand to actually set your strategy for, number one, for your company. What are you going after for your company? What is your company vision? What's your culture? All of that ties into the product you're building. And then you move on to the second phase, defining your product, making sure that, you have a hypothesis for the audiences who you think are going to play this, and testing that over time. Ultimately, it's incredibly important for you to start with those hypotheses. Otherwise, you're going to go, if you imagine, a boat, you're in a boat, and you have a North Star, and you understand the direction you're going, you're going to get there much more quickly than if you don't have that North Star and you invest a lot of money and zigzag on your way there. So it's really important to have those initial hypotheses. I think of it as minimum viable because when you're early on in your company or product life cycle, you don't know all the answers yet. And I think a lot of the kind of larger company brand exercises are too overwrought for that type of phase. But we run a program like this during our speedrun program where we literally spend 3 weeks, but a half an hour with some homework each week to make sure that people can define that initial minimum viable brand and then ultimately give them the direction they need to start building.
I think you wanted to say something about your favorite GDC talk, which I also love this talk, which is nobody cares about your game.
Yeah, I think another important point is you have to start with the assumption everyone loves their product, everyone plays their product, they're excited about their game, but nobody cares, and ultimately it's your job to make them care, and that's why you need to really develop your point of view and then find a way to reach the audience and make sure that they understand what you're building, try it out, and hopefully they love it too.
Yeah, for sure. I can't tell you how many times I work with clients or with game teams that I work on, and I'm like, well, I did a project recently where I went around and I talked to a lot of the senior members of the game team, and I asked them, okay, this is a great feature. Who is this for, and what's your vision for it? And I got 3 completely different answers. And it was, I'm like, really? You guys kind of have been doing this a long time. You've been making a games a long time. And so just so you know, it happens to everybody at all companies, big and small, that this is one of the most important things that you could do is get the team aligned around what is your product? What is the vision? Who is the audience? How do I make the right game for the right customer with the right market fit? And that's probably one of the most important things that you can do really, really early on, especially if you're entering speedrun, right? Don't you pretty much require that they come and pitch that as part of the process, I would imagine? Yeah. So, Matt, do you want to hit? So what's interesting is the UA guy is now going to talk to you about brand.
Yeah, this is dogs are hanging out with cats suddenly. I think of there's a Lewis Carroll quote from Through the Looking Glass. He says, if you don't know which way you're going, it doesn't matter which way you go. And that's what happens when you don't set a North Star, because then everyone's just you have 3 different answers to the same thing. And just like when you're thinking about your roadmap, you should think about, like, what do we want to be in 10 years, 3 years, 1 year, and back into that. You don't need to invest more than a couple days, again, probably on setting that. But you need to make sure everyone's aligned, because it has to be consistent if it's going to stick. You have to be able to answer, why should I care about this, to Doug's point. And you need people to go back to that. So when you're building features, when you're hiring people, like, it all comes back. It's part and parcel with your culture. So when you're hiring people, you have to be able to look at that and say, are they living those brand values? Are we living those brand values? And when you're setting those, you have to ask yourself, like, are these ambitious, or are these what we actually are? And then that plays into your voice, your art. It plays into how you address people, how you do everything, basically. But you have to set it early. And I think that expected value per dollar per hour of investing in a brand super early, you may not go all in. You may not do a $250,000 brand project, but you should spend some time thinking about it. And there are many frameworks by which you can do that quickly with your leadership team.
Yeah, I just did a panel today with a bunch of marketing folks. And one of the things that is really interesting is people are starting to, in a sense, outsource their UA. So whether it's TikTok Creative Challenge, or whether it's I'm just going to write a brief and send it to influencers and ask them to make me creative, I'm going to run it. You have to give them a guardrail. You have to be able to tell them what you want, or else you're going to frustrate them because they're not going to want to do that. So that's another reason why it's important, not only for the traditional sense, but for the UA sense. All right. So we've got a plan. We've got a team. We've got a brand. Now it's time for MarTech, which is my least favorite thing of all time, which is why we have Brian to help us with this one. It is so overwhelming. You got a million things going on. How do I think about and approach the MVP for MarTech? Because if everybody, you just can't turn on UA and you magically are like, I get ROAS, this is great. You have to actually be thoughtful about how this works. So how do you approach helping people with MVP for MarTech?
So, the first piece is you have to have some underlying foundational technology or platform to start with. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I don't think I said anything groundbreaking there. In fact, I didn't. But that's the key part of it. Then ultimately choosing a media strategy, that's pretty obvious. Something like AppsFlyer obviously is a very critical piece of it. And then when you think about the lifespan of a user, and what is like LTV really look like in terms of like not just a day or 7 days, but maybe a year, then ultimately CRM and lifecycle tools are like super critical now. Frankly, Jen, they weren't big in gaming 5-6 years ago, but in my view, and I think a lot of people might agree, is that after the changes with iOS 14, now CRM tools and the ability to keep users around longer and advertise in front of them using retargeting tools and different mechanisms to keep them engaged are like way more critical. So I honestly think that not a lot of people think that far ahead now, but that's something that everybody should be considering and thinking about as they try and extend the lifeblood of their users. So yeah, that's how I kind of like look at it now. The other thing, Jen, that I'm going to say, based on all the consolidation within the market, following iOS 14, following challenges even in the VC community, making bets, first-party data is like the gold mine that everybody has. Email, phone number, that's just starting off. Like, I know people now are basically utilizing Fatui completion as like a first-party data tool to combine product and marketing together in the same discipline, and they're utilizing that as a signal to improve how they're operating their marketing tech stack, and ultimately getting better outcomes in terms of ROAS and ROI. So like first-party data to me now is like, it's so critical. And how do you do that? How do you pass this data internally, externally to third parties like Meta, Google, and do it appropriately in a way that's safe, that falls within the guardrails that ultimately all the platforms are requiring upon you? That's something that everybody should be thinking about. I mean, at an early stage, I can understand that's something further out, but when you're at the mid stage and to the large stage, if this is not grasped appropriately and used super critically, you're falling behind. And ultimately, you're at the behest of the platforms themselves about determining your fate. So your first-party data is yours, and ultimately, you need to utilize it in the best way possible to get the best success.
And you also have solutions for PC console, right? So many people think that MMPs just exist for mobile, but there are now tools that help, because half the room is doing PC console, that help with that as well.
Yeah, so the most simplistic way to combine PC console and mobile together is to create your own authentication scheme. So basically what we call it customer ID. If you have, like, say, if EA was here, I don't know if they are, but if EA has an EA ID, you want to be able to utilize that, capture it, and then pass that along safely across each platform to ultimately touch that user in different places. So at the very core, if somebody's utilizing some sort of schema, authentication schema, and has an identifier that can be passed internally to its users in its ecosystem, that if you can do that right at the beginning, you've basically solved all the major challenges. And then ultimately you can publish successfully on mobile, PC console, anywhere. And then ultimately that becomes an incredibly valuable user if they enter your ecosystem.
Matt, how do you think about this in terms of, like, build versus buy, and especially for the smaller folks and maybe the medium folks?
Yeah, I have a few quick points to follow up on Brian's point. I would say even if you're not cross-platform, you should have a user ID, because you may have more games. And so when you want to cross promo, instead of reacquire the exact same person on Facebook again for $20 or $5 or 30 cents, like you will need that. And it will also help with underlying data infrastructure to understand when somebody changes their email address or they're coming back in and you're seeing they're at the same IP and they have similar login or activities. So that's one. I'll also say that some people were doing CRM and Fatui Complete as an optimization point pre-2019. But yeah, I think the build versus buy, early, I mean, it's like you have to kind of like make that judgment call, and sometimes you are best just buying it. The build is like a whole pain, and everybody always thinks it's easier than it is, and that it's going to be cheaper and faster, and you'll end up with some bastardized version of whatever you could have just bought. Sometimes there are tools that you just simply want one feature of, and so it's like, can we build that feature? Is that actually all we need? And then sometimes you're buying it knowing, and this is, again, when you get back into your planning of saying, we're making a deliberate choice right now. We know this isn't best for us in 10 years, but it's best for us right now for the next year. But that has to go somewhere to be fixed later, because we run into companies all the time, especially companies that were growing quickly, where it's duct taped together because they're printing cash. And they're like, well, we'll fix it later. And then they wake up huge. And then they're like, okay, nobody wants to deal with that. And unwinding that at scale is such a pain in the ass. And so if you can get ahead of that and build for durability as you go, and take note of the things that you've done that work against your durability, so that you don't lose sight of them, and you don't just put them off for forever and then wake up with $30 million worth of stuff that you need to fix that would have been an incremental 5% in cost and time if you had just done it from the beginning. And there's no like perfect solution to that.
Yeah, I lived through that. So, Cody, I wanted you to tell some stories around how do you work with your development partners who come to you and are like, I don't want to fucking put this in my game. Like, why do I need Firebase? I can't put an SDK in. So how important is it to be able to convince your development partners that this is one team, one dream? This helps everyone. What's your story there?
So many stories. So Riot was one of those companies that was extraordinarily successful with the game that it made, League of Legends, which obviously is not a mobile game. So things like a mobile SDK are not in the lexicon of a lot of the early developers that were there. And once we launched Teamfight Tactics on mobile and then Legends of Runeterra on mobile, our team, as kind of the mobile SMEs in-house, had to go to the dev folks and be like, hi, I need you to do this extra sprint cycle and put in this thing that you've never seen or heard of to do a function that you don't actually personally like, because most people don't like advertising when they're the receiver of it. So a lot of barriers to unwind, but once you're able to show kind of like one of my favorite tests that got a lot of people over the gates of like, should we do advertising or not, is if you have an iPhone or an Android, I would tell people, go into the App Store, search the name of, in our case, I would say Wild Rift. They would search it. And the first thing at the top is not an ad for Wild Rift. And it would piss off everybody in the company that saw that. And I would get people to put in the SDKs I needed. So you just have to bring it home. You have to it is exactly as Jen said, one team, one dream. You're building the same game. Our goal is a good experience for players. We are not antagonistic to one another. I understand that their sprint cycles are impacted and 6 months behind. So part of it is on me. I need to understand how they work, how their team works, and get ahead of them in the right amount of time to get what I need in time. I can't go to them 1 month before I need it and say, hey, like dev person who does this magic that I don't understand, like put this in now. And they're like, dude, I'm 8 months backlogged. Like that's not happening. So like learn your partner teams, learn how they work.
Yeah, I think that's why I wanted to go back to order of operations. The very start of this is as folks that do this for a living, we need to work with our development partners and go to them with a roadmap and get it on their sprint plan. And if you're a development partner, you need to reach out to your marketing partner and say, hey, I know that you're going to ask me to do stuff. What do you need? When do you need it? And put the pressure back on us as well. All right, so now let's go to the next stage, which is, are you ready to start scaling? And so I call this stage, do you have a leaky bucket or not? And for many of you, this is, what are your KPIs? Do you have the right retention, the right monetization? Is it worth putting fuel on the fire in order for you to truly start scaling? And so I talk a lot about this on the podcast. We talked about it with Squad Busters, how I thought they had a leaky bucket and they poured a lot of money, and you can see kind of the result of that is they might not have been able to grow as much as they wanted to grow. So Matt, I wanted you to talk a little bit first about how do you identify if your game is ready, and what are the things that you need to do to understand if you're ready to go?
Yeah, I think the first is that there's this misnomer, I think, of what a growth team is. Like a long time ago, growth was like growth hacking and like, I don't know, putting stickers on stop signs. And then it became, we'll have the marketing people talk to the product people. And that was like this big innovation. It boils down to everybody on the team is the growth team. And if you're a big company, the person who answers the door when somebody rings the bell is part of your growth team. Like that experience of an investor or somebody interviewing, like all of that stuff matters. And so when we think about scaling games, you really need to, like, one other piece I'll say is that like if you want to reduce your CAC and you want to increase your LTV, 80% of the levers for that sit outside of the platform. So not some magic audience that everybody knows about. It's like it's diet and exercise at the end of the day. And nobody wants to do it. They all want paid to fix it. Or we'll hire some guy who's amazing at UI UX and he's going to fix it. Or so brand is going to save us. Like nobody's going to save you. And so this comes back to like, we all have to be working together. We have to care more about the baby than we do about, our individual efforts. And so that's approaching it with, leveraging data. The data has to be clean, obviously. And if it's not clean, you need to know where it's at and you need to come up with a plan on when and where you're going to fix it. But it's leveraging consumer insights to understand what the customers actually like versus what we think they're going to like. Leveraging paid to like accelerate speed of learning, but not for the sake of getting the money back. We'll do that later. Leveraging Fatui and all the mid-funnel stuff and just the onboarding, making sure that that's tight. Live ops, massive. CRM, like Doug mentioned earlier. It's like, what are we going to spend 50 million re-engaging fans on Facebook when we haven't sent a single push? Probably not. So like, let's all look at the center of that. And so ultimately you'll know it when you were making more money than you're spending on paid. You're going to have to do a lot of that organically. You're going to learn through some paid efforts, but it really is everybody in the same focus and like being open to when somebody comes. I've seen so many times at other companies where somebody will say maybe they're not in lifecycle and they come and say, oh, I got this great email over the weekend and maybe we could do that. And the lifecycle person internally is like, okay, thanks. And then that person who gave the offer, who brought the idea together, suddenly they hear from their boss that says, hey, did you talk to Stacy today? Stacy talked to Deborah, and Deborah told me you were talking to her about something that you think she's like, Stacy's busy right now. Don't bring that stuff to her. And like, you just keep focusing on paid. That will kill a company. If you're in a company like that now, leave. It's just a waste of everybody's time. You have to care about what you're doing. This is why the culture matters. This is why the vision matters. And sticking to that and being consistent is really important.
Doug, it was really funny as we kind of I made them like script this out like a podcast. So sorry, I made them do all this extra work. And when Doug was writing his answer to this one, he's like, retention. So go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share a story with, I won't comment on Squad Busters. I did not work on Squad Busters, but with Brawl Stars, I did work on, and we were in open beta for roughly a year and a half. And the team was iterating, trying new things, went from a vertical, gameplay mechanic to horizontal. got the community upset, but ultimately was the right choice for the game. But retention wasn't fully there yet. And we got to the point where the team was considering killing the game, but there were a couple of things we had not tried yet. The first was understanding it's a multiplayer game. The network effects were not fully accounted for in the retention. And so Supercell had historically launched open betas on Apple iOS only. And so we launched the game on Google Play as well. And ultimately, that really helped improve the global retention metrics. And then we also launched in Asia. So that gave us, in several markets in Asia, that gave us a lot of belief that it would actually perform very well in multiple markets in Asia, and ended up doing really, really well in Korea especially. And so thinking through, the moral of that is thinking through, what are your goals for your soft launch, and how can you replicate the environment as closely as possible that's going to happen when you launch globally, and really trying to get a good understanding for retention. You'll never have a perfect measure during your soft launch, but really spend a lot of time setting your goals. And also, don't just think about iterating on the product, also iterate on your marketing. Try to understand what messaging is working, what creative is working, and then at the same time, build a community. There was a large group of hardcore Brawl Stars fans that were very excited about the game when we announced that it was going live globally, and you want to pour all of these new players into this very enthusiastic community, because that's ultimately going to be a springboard for going global and hopefully make your UA more efficient as you grow.
Oh, I love that story. I remember we were at Riot kind of watching what you all were doing with Brawl Stars and seeing it in soft launch, and going from portrait to landscape was like just fascinating. And I think I was at Scopely too, and I wish they had done that with Squad Busters. So Brian, what about you for this stage?
Well, one thing that really excited me about coming here to LA from San Francisco for Tech Week in Los Angeles was A16Z, frankly, because we work very closely with them. I think anybody here has an incredible amount of respect for them as a firm. I mean, they're top notch. I mean, it's just the way it is. But what also excited me was there's a story I can tell about a company. Roz is here from Sleeper. So, hi, Roz. There was a company that we worked with that was sort of in Roz's space called Grid Rival. Grid Rival is a daily fantasy auto racing property. So basically think like Prize Picks, FanDuel, DraftKings, but for like F1 and for stock car racing, etc. And one of the things that they said was, we're entering an A round, and we need your data to prove how our marketing program is working to go get this round. And I thought that was an incredibly insightful, number one, but also surprising admission by somebody saying, we need your data to prove out what we're doing. We got the product working right now. It took us to tool it for a couple of years, which folks like yourselves know how hard that is. And then ultimately, once the product was there, they're like, we need to scale, but we can't prove it, and we can't go and get a round of funding until we actually can prove our marketing. So they used AppsFlyer's data to go get that round, and they were successful at it. But that was a kind of a use case and an outcome I would never would have experienced or expected, but it certainly rang true, and I expect that kind of use case will come along much more often than it did in the past. But that's really exciting to see. Another thing I'll just mention, and we talked about it before, and I want to reemphasize, and Jen said I want to leave you with 3 insights. The insight that I would give to generally at smaller companies, whether they be SMBs, startups, etc., the fit between product and marketing is not necessarily the fit of the product and marketing itself, it's the people. So if you're a C-level person, a CEO, and you're tasked with hiring, your MVPs for both product and marketing, if they don't get along, if they're not aligned on the strategy of the company that you see from the top down, you will not succeed. They have to be on the same wavelength. They have to understand the same strategy. They have to understand the same goals, the same North Star, as they said before. If they don't get along and they don't know what the goal is above them, then they're going to be against each other the whole time. Because in many cases, their KPIs are almost diametrically opposed to one another. And if they don't actually work together properly and they're not understanding the greater goal, success is going to be very, very challenging.
All right, thanks. Yeah, good idea. All right, so let's go into mistake territory. What are your most famous mistakes? I like to think of this as Yoda advice. We can't win all the time, and I think the most important thing that we can do is learn from mistakes that we make. So Matt, I think I'm gonna put you on the floor first. What's your biggest fuck up?
Oh man, biggest fuck up. I'm not sure. We've at scale you make a $250,000 mistake and it doesn't have really any meaningful impact. But and it's hard to make $1 million or $2 million mistake. But there's a few things. I actually think it's on this. Hopefully, isn't viewed as a cop out, but it's actually missed opportunity. So it's having opportunities to scale where maybe you've got a target CAC of 10 and you're seeing like 1050s and you're like, okay, we're just holding 10s and we're going to chase 9.5s, right? It is always more expensive to acquire users tomorrow. Always, always, always. The marketplace gets busier. There are, of course, like fluctuations in market dynamics, but like if you're seeing 10s now, you'll see 15s in 3 years. So like you always look back and say, man, why don't we just unload the clip back then? Because it's better. I think that would be one. And then the other thing is balancing for short-term and long-term needs. So you have to really make sure that you're spending your time on especially early, on the most important stuff that day and that week that ladders up to those like longer term goals. And then really investing in predictive analytics earlier, because like that, if you can predict the future in any place in this world, if you can predict the future, you will print cash. And so the better you can get at understanding your data, predicting what people will do, having hypotheses before you test something, calling your shot like in advance is super important, because it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback and say, well, we kind of thought that wouldn't work. It's like, hold on, did we think it wasn't going to work, or are we like rewriting history here? And then holding true to that. So you can say, like, as Doug was talking about when they were optimizing, it's like, okay, that didn't work. Let's get back in the ring and go again. But you have to walk away with learnings from those mistakes and then just iterate the hell out of it. I'll try to think of a really big fuck up, and maybe I'll come up with another one. But yeah. I can tell you one, a quick one. It wasn't mine, technically, but I did see it. I did solve it.
For
whatever
a
it's worth.
friend,
Yeah, for a friend. Yeah, it wasn't me. It's a guy named Mark Widdoes. No, but actually, when I started at King, great company, amazing people, great culture, everything. Nothing bad to say about King. But they had built their own attribution system, and it had been there since 2013, because they were like, we're going to build it. We don't want all of our data leaking. I was coming in from Zynga at the time, and I'm like, okay, let me look at some things. And through some questions in like 6 weeks of me, maybe 9 weeks of me being there, I uncovered $25 million a year in recurring annual fraud. It's attribution fraud, a bunch of click stuffing, a bunch of other stuff. You have a team of 1.5 people working on this product. Companies like AppsFlyer have 200 maybe, I don't know, and you're looking at threat vectors across everything versus your siloed area. And so we ended up closing that off. I think we got that down to like $500,000 a year in like 6 weeks, and then we closed the rest of it up in another 6. But you have to go back and revisit stuff. I mean, like if you have nothing else to do, you can go look at the stuff that you built and figure out if that's still good. So fresh blood helps, and yeah, everybody's kind of figuring it out as they go, even big companies like King.
Yeah. Cody, what about you? I think it's not always just that. Sometimes it's softer skills too, but go ahead.
I was going to say, he actually teed this up perfectly. So this was a mistake before Riot that luckily I did not make at Riot, and I'm very thankful, and I feel really confident in the team. If you goal UA managers on strict ROI or like strict trials, you're going to get a ton of ad fraud. That's what's going to happen, because some of the best ROI is going to come from your organic installs that are being claimed by an ad network or affiliate network or something else. So if you give them extremely rigid targets like that, they're going to default human behavior to going, oh, where's the high ROI? It's coming from these channels. Why is it coming from those channels? Because it was what you were probably supposed to be getting for free that's coming through click stuffing or ad stacking or something else. And so attribution partners matter a lot. They have anti-fraud suites, things like that. But also giving your team more of a fiduciary responsibility and role, having them invested in the brand, in the company, having them have the bandwidth to experiment and explore and try things out and to dig and break things and fix things. My team at this point is incredible at breaking tech down and building back up, understanding the black box to the best that they can. And some of your best marketing is going to come from testing that wasn't ROI positive at the start, and you had the space to iterate on it. So just give people that flexibility. Think of it as a test bed. If you just stick to strict goals like that, you will be very blind to a lot of people that are able to take advantage of you with that rigidity.
Yeah, of course.
So one thing just to build on that point that I want to flag, and it comes back to that culture setting, it comes back to the planning and like setting the course of what is expected for the business. That will also make sure, having that steady will also make sure you don't end up hiring a product person and a marketing person that don't align, because they would have known the vision before they signed the paper. So you can avoid that by having the plan. But There are many. The part I wanted to kind of reiterate is that ownership piece. This is the hiring, the people that sold candy when they were in 3rd grade. Is that when you have that, and that's a true part of your culture, you get the best things. And when somebody brings a great idea and they get shut down, they find another company, and then you're left with all the people that are like can't find a job or like just kind of coasting. And so, in that same King example, there are many companies where if you were to bring something and say, hey, I just uncovered $25 million a year in recurring fraud. We are 100% sure it's happening. There are so many companies where the person I brought that to would say, who knows about this? Okay, don't tell him, don't tell her, don't tell him. And then it would go all the way back down because they're like, we're trying to raise, especially for early companies. You have CEOs complicit with fraud because they're like, well, we'll fix it once we get past this round, but like, don't tell anybody because we're trying to raise. It's the worst thing you could possibly do. Whereas other companies are like, and the person I brought that to could have been like, well, if I bring this up, they're going to ask me why I didn't solve that. Why has this been going on? Nobody asked that. Everyone's like, sweet, high five, it's done. Great. What else do we need to do? And that's the kind of culture that stems from having people with an ownership mentality. And you have to back that up with comp. You have to back it up with equity. You have to back it up with what you actually do versus what you say you'll do. So that is super important, the ownership piece.
Yeah, I think the culture of learning from your failure and making sure that you don't penalize people, but you lift them up because they found something or they made a mistake. As long as you grow from it, I think that's insanely important. Oh, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, just from a manager hat on now, I want to be the first person that my team brings a mistake to. Like, if they're hiding it from me, that's my fault. 100%. So, like, you want to make sure that, one, they know, if they're super junior, they might not know how to fix it. So you help them. That's a teaching opportunity. If they're super senior, I would expect that they're like, hey, this thing happened. I tried this, like, it's not working. And now we go fix it together. But if you hide it, it just breaks more and grows more and festers. And, like, that's the manager's fault because you made them afraid to come and talk to you first.
Yeah, for sure. Doug, what about you with mistakes? Anything fun?
I'll share a simple one. I worked at a startup quite a long time ago, and I'll connect it also to UA. And it really ties back to the idea of being very, very in step with your product team. And one of the big challenges was we wanted to start running UA campaigns to help grow the game, but we did not give the product team enough time to actually implement all of the instrumentation. And we ended up actually doubling the number of installs, in the measurement than we actually had. And so we were much more aggressive with our UA than we should have been. We discovered it after a couple of days, but when you're a startup, that's really important to make sure you understand that everything's working correctly and that your measurement makes sense because you don't have that much money in your runway. So we, basically went back, discovered the mistake, fixed it, and everything was okay. But you really have to make sure you give the team enough heads up to make sure that they understand what you want to do, get there in the weeds with them, and make sure they understand the value of the work that they're doing.
Again, I think one team, one dream comes up a lot here of just a lot of it being the softer skills of relationship building, respect, transparency, all of these different things.
That always just comes from the top down. It's pervasive across the company, and that's why I kind of hark to that again, is that if the C-levels, the CEO doesn't have a strong culture that they built, then all that empowerment you're discussing, Jen, doesn't exist in most companies. I go back to Supercell, and Ilka basically built that on his own. If everybody's met him, he's a really tremendous. I mean, he's a great guy. Everybody likes Ilka. Nobody could not like Ilka. But he created a culture at Supercell that just doesn't change, and everybody gets on there has the same dream. And it's really cool to see companies like that kind of grow, and then organically the culture continues to grow. Horizontally, vertically. It's just really cool to see that happen. But what we're describing doesn't happen unless that person kind of sets the tone right at the beginning.
All right, so that kind of concludes our prepared remarks. I would love to open up for questions. All right, well, hell yeah, here you go.
I've been waiting. No, thank you guys so much. I would love to just ask each of you the same question and just kind of role play a little bit. So you each have been working on a horror game, right? Different horror game. You are indie developers. You have zero money for user acquisition. How do you get to your first 10,000 users in 3 months?
Yeah, so
this is like a game. We should have made this it's like an RPG. Go.
Yeah, I think of it at the lens of, again, this is coming from like console, mobile, and desktop. There is so much stuff you do for free that later gets amplified by paid. So part of that is the community that you build around it. Obviously, some influencers require payment. Some don't because they love that shit and it helps build an audience for them. Also, getting really good at SEO, a very, at this point, not talked about discipline that much. Like, you own your web space, you, to a degree, own your app store presence, right? Absolutely optimize the shit out of all of those. You have so many dashboards and things that can tell you how you're doing in those places, and then be your own influencer, right? Like, TikTok has truly democratized what marketing can be. Advertise your own product. Like, go to horror experiences, get into that space, meet people, have your friends do it. Like, that stuff can take off without a professional marketer. That would be what I would start with. All the things I can get for free that later you can crank and amplify with paid. Because just say you start making TikToks, now you get a little bit of money, people are down anything. Boost your own TikTok with a Spark ad. And then if someone else starts doing one for content about your stuff, boost theirs with a Spark ad. Well, I'm saying when she gets there. I'm saying, like, start with the free stuff that you can then amplify later, so you've already built the engine.
Do you think you'll get to 10,000 users in 3 months?
Well, it depends on how good the app is. But
I think this is a tough question. I mean, and the truth is, you, in many cases, like, you have to get the money for the talent or the media somewhere, right? Now, it's like, how do I, if we could answer that like with an honest like playbook, I'd be in Barbados or something. I don't know. But like, where I would start, because that's a very tough challenge, I would start by looking at retention, looking at the data, talking to the customers. Like, I would talk to the community. I would probably engage them and just say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. We have this mission. You love our game. You're one of our top 25 players. We've interviewed you about what you love about our game. We've built a real connection with you. We have a private Slack channel just for you guys. We've been engaging, and this goes back to engaging with them early. This goes back to the consumer insights piece that we talked about a moment ago. But if you have those relationships because you've been fostering that, then you can go to them and say, guys, help us figure this out. We have no money. We love this game. We have this amazing roadmap that you guys have influenced. We need your help. We don't have cash. So, like, you either need the media dollars, which you don't have, so you could go raise or something like that, but that doesn't solve your problem. Or you need the people to go out and do that. And then you need those people to work for free because you don't have any dollars. Right. So it's like, what should we do? What can you guys do? Is there a contest? Maybe you could float I'm just brainstorming, but for the winner who brings like the most people into our game, we're going to make a special character of you and you'll be like forever part of the canon, right? Something like that. I would start there. It's a really tough problem though. But I think you're creating as much. I create daily content, push it. Like, I find the communities where those conversations are already happening. So if there's like a horror subreddit, hey, we have this game, we're beta testers, we want this thing, but like, you just get out and beg basically, and then hope that those people are like, okay, we're going to push this. So that's not the best answer, but that's what I would do. She said it was a great answer, by the way. If anybody,
you know what we heard,
okay.
It is a great answer. Exactly.
The cameras. I want the cameras to pick that up. Yeah.
I don't have as much expertise because these folks, all of them here, except for myself, have been running high frequency marketing at high levels. I mean, traditionally, like, that's very impressive. These guys are very impressive. But what I have seen work, from a free perspective, is absolutely influencers certainly work. The ability to give like referral codes to customers and offer them something in the game is like super critical too, just when you're getting off the ground. And then what's really exciting is that, initially, there's ad networks that are out there, and then obviously there are self-reporting networks, and I don't want to use the acronym SRN, but I did, Meta, Google. But beyond that, Reddit, Discord, X, all of these are owned media or free solutions you can use to drive that initial burst before you go to paid media. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting that own media, free media in this case, is successful as paid. Traditionally, and I think these guys would agree, that when they've done analysis and studies, paid media, because of the intent of the user, ends up actually being a more qualified and higher LTV level user. But that being said, if you're starting out and you don't actually have a paid media budget, the own media channels are out there for you. It doesn't mean you'll get to the amount of scale that you need to be really successful, but it'll get you going right off the bat. And then ultimately, organic growth from there comes from it. So what's really exciting for us is now X, Reddit, Discord now, they're all really getting in the game, and they're really focused on how are we going to build a games business, whether it be paid media or owned. And they're really catering to the marketers now, and primarily games, because that's where they're seeing the most success.
A lot of ground's already been covered, so I'll keep it pretty focused. I would say content and community. So number one, what is unique about your game that you can actually bring to the market? Why is it unique in the horror genre? I'll throw out an example. Cult of the Lamb did this incredibly well on TikTok, where they had really interesting art, really fun stories, like almost micro stories that they were telling, and they were able to build this audience organically. And so you need to find that unique hook, I think, and really bring people into your community. And so, bring them into your Discord, bring them into your game, get them to be super active. And ultimately, on the community side, you want all of these members to feel like they're co-owners of the game, of the product with you. And you can do that in a number of different ways. But, if you can give them some kind of social currency that they're sharing with their friends, that they're bringing them into, the game, and ultimately they're finding this game really early and they can help build the audience with you, I think that would be really powerful. And then, of course, working with creators as you can get them on board as well is really important.
I'm going to give you two. So just to prove that I still can do this work, I'm going to give you two things. Number one, there just so happens to be a podcast called Zero Cost Acquisition Tools on the Deconstructor of Fun channel. It was from like a year ago. And so let me kind of steal one of their ideas and give it to you, which is go on to all of the streamers for all the other horror games, Dead by Daylight. Hey, I've been really playing this new game XYZ. Come check it out. It's so great. And so you co-opt the comment section of all of the streamers for the games in your target audience. Super sneaky and cheap. There you go. So that's number one. And number two, here's a good one. Yeah, see, maybe I'm still good at this. I don't know. I got it. Number two is there is an amazing company, and they cost a little bit of money, but maybe they're here and maybe they would help you. So there's a company called Winwalk. And if you're not familiar with them, I'm going to figure out how to get them on a podcast soon. They are a community platform that is basically like community on steroids. And so what they can do now is aggregate all of the different community pieces together, and then they gamify it. And so as you're going through and you ask a community member to like a piece of content, refer someone to the game, whatever that is, they get in-game and potentially out-of-game rewards from engaging in this behavior. And so for me, these are the kinds of tools that are marketing 2.0. Like, I haven't done a TV ad in like 10 years. TV ads don't work anymore. In fact, I was in front of a major client last week and said, who does TV ads? And I'm like, TV ads are dumb. And I was like, oh shit, I'm in front of people that still do TV ads. So that was probably a career client limiting move, but whatever, the idea is. But the idea here is that as you think about community and community 2.0, so Winwalk has this thing called Harbor. It's fucking awesome. So hopefully soon we'll do a podcast and we can go in much deeper, but I don't know, Colin, or you here? Well, all right. I'll introduce you later on and we'll see if they can help you out. All right. Sorry, that was a lot. Do you want more?
I realized I have one thing, and this should be actually applicable to pretty much anybody in the room as well. Make sure that you're not blocking your potential players from getting in. So actually do a really deep dive into your Fatui, your early onboarding. How long did it take you to get to the fun? How long does it take to download this without a home Wi-Fi connection? You might accidentally be blocking a ton of people that had the intent to get in, and they're like, I only had 4 minutes on the bus. Fuck it, I'm out. The easier, think about, I'll use the gym as an example. The closer the gym is to your own home, the more likely you are to go. If it's in your own home, you're probably going even more. So the harder you make it for them to get to the fun or to the goal, the more you bleed out the people that you did get for free.
Yeah. And don't discount friends and family too. Reward, do a competition. Hey, friends and family, whoever, give them a code, whoever brings in the most people, you buy them dinner. I don't know, make up something cool that they would like. But so hopefully that was helpful. All right. Other questions? Oh. Here, I'll just.
Hi, folks. I'm so grateful to be here. My name is David Abramoff, ex-Sega, ex-Activision, ex-whatever. Doesn't matter. Yeah, essentially. I've been on the brand side and the product marketing side of video games. And, a lot of what we get, especially for these AAA games, is we get piecemeal information. We get piecemeal information of product. Here's the gamer, experience. Here's the testing. Here you get a version that comes out, and we have to sit there and play for hours, right? And then we have to figure out whether our community, we have the social folks, we have our brand, product, partners, all those folks that we need to align with and to communicate that information back. So I wanted to ask you whether you have an idea of, or you felt the frequency between the product, or like what's happening in a production, what's happening in a brand marketing, right, or product marketing, how often the frequency of communication is, and whether it's just sort of like, here's we get the testing with the players, and here you get a beta, or you get an alpha, or you get a pre-alpha, or whatever. How often you communicate that? Because so often, especially from the social folks, we hear so much chatter for Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever. There's a huge community that we have to like almost constantly communicate. But I felt like there's always been sort of delineated communication time. So I don't know if you experienced that, if you have any thoughts on that.
So if I were to kind of summarize that, how on earth can you keep an alignment of the communication between the product team and all of the other teams so that you truly have a transparent communication to your player? And I think we have a lot of stories from, like, Riot does this probably better than anyone else, but you guys go, and then we'll finish up with some Riot stories.
I was just going to say, like, you should be in planning mode. I mean, depending on your scale, like 2 weeks a quarter, right? And so when you tell that story of like you're getting this piecemeal, you're hearing about it, I'm like, that's just broken comms. Like, you should have been in there when they were concepting. Like, it should have never even been greenlit before we checked it with product marketing to say, hey, what are the other opportunities here? Is this like is this addressable, right? And like, UA team, can you go tell me what the CACs might be on something like this? Because we're trying to pick 1 out of 6 titles that we're going to pursue. But I think in a healthy org, like you were planning 1 or 2 weeks a quarter, which is a pain in the ass, but it lets you operate really cleanly through the rest of that. And then you're meeting weekly. You can't put a 1,000-person team together every week, but you can have constituents and tiger teams, and that's like where it comes into the leadership, and that calms down. And yeah, sometimes companies like to silo that, but you wake up with all these problems. Like we need to institute some late stage MarTech, and the product team's like, what is this? That should have been in a planning session a quarter or 2 before, where marketing says, hey, this is cool that you guys are building that. Heads up, I'm going to need these 5 things. And data says, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to need this. And Ninja's like, well, okay, then we have to move this out a quarter. And then product fights them. And then we have a debate on what's more important today. And somebody wins, somebody loses. And then it's on the roadmap. And then we do it. And then when people aren't being held accountable for that, we find new people who are more accountable, right? And so, but this is like, comes back to the culture again. And so,
well, actually, is this a cultural issue in terms of like Japanese to American culture?
Oh, you could definitely dive in that direction, but I think in general, you can definitely dive in that direction. But I think in general, folks have to work a little bit before they produce the next step for us to review and try to associate with the market in general. So I'm just wondering, in your experience, how often or the frequency you would see
weekly, yeah.
of the two teams coming together and trying to be like, contend which way to go.
I was going to say, I was never in band, but like you have sectionals and you meet as your section, and then you have horns and brass are meeting, and it's a little bit bigger, and you have percussion and other stuff meeting, and then you all come together and try to play, and then it sucks, and you go back and you come back, and eventually it gets better. So it's like the equivalent to me of like, I'm dealing with a thing where we're going to perform in 2 weeks, and I didn't know that the part had changed for the entire string section. How often should we be meeting? It's like, well, we need to know what the left hands are doing, and it's like
weekly.
10 people, but like weekly, and then internally, you're setting those in that planning. You're setting what you're going to do for the quarter, and then you'll decide when that gets done. But you'll probably communicate that's going to be done month 1. This is month 2, and so many teams are relying on that, and you're relying on them. So like this is where that comms has to be tight, and that vision has to be really clear on what's most important today. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of people working and nothing actually exiting the system, and then good people leave, and you're left with whoever you're left with.
I'll just add one more point. I think transparency, the metrics is really important. Like at Supercell, the entire company saw all of the metrics for all of the games. And so that naturally leads to conversation around what's happening. If there's a huge spike, people ask questions. They want to understand what's happening. Someone in the company probably knows exactly what's happening, and is the same with if there's a drop. And so I think ultimately the team, and especially the team working on a particular game, if it's in a live operations environment, should have access to that. And then each team needs to develop rituals to really talk about what's happening and make sure everyone knows what's coming, and then ultimately retroing what they've done.
Yeah, and on the note of rituals and meetings and things like that, now again, I'll come in from a whatever Riot is now 4,500 people company. you can augment that with Slack and different communication methods. You don't want to get like a Slack apocalypse where you're added to a temp channel that isn't a temp channel and it's there for 5 years and your Slack is insane. But like you augment, your weekly meetings with follow-ups in the Slack channel so you can keep the weekly meetings shorter because of the number of people you might need them in or the seniority of people you need in there. You can work asynchronously, but you do have to be very regimented with things like Slack if you go that route, because it can just devolve really quickly. Really quickly.
One technique we used actually on TFT was we had a standing weekly meeting, and so it was me leading marketing and the head of the product for TFT, the head of the entire game, and we committed that before the meeting we would put agenda items on, and we know that, and it was things that we wanted to talk about in person. And so it would be, us, and typically I would even invite Cody as like a guest speaker if it was a UA topic or whatever it was. And so we knew what we were going to talk about. And there were some weeks where it was like, hey, everything's great and we don't care. So that's one thing, is like have an agenda and you commit to adding to it. The other thing is that there is a role at Riot called the comms lead. And so this person is crucial. It is the universal translator for speaking player to speaking dev to speaking marketing. And so this human has the ability to go and almost like sit with the devs and absorb through osmosis everything that's going on, come and talk to the marketing and marketing speak, and then be able to write an article and player speak. And that human is typically a gamer, and typically someone who gets a little bit PR trained, and can be a ninja to really help be your like secret weapon or a spy, so to speak, but in a good way, right? In a good way. So hopefully that's helpful. Other questions? Mike is coming for you from over there.
My question is about metrics. You guys talked about the need for rituals and teams communicating, but a lot about product marketing. I want to talk about design and how do you guys incorporate metrics with your design team, and how do you balance between the aesthetic and the mechanics of the design, and how do you balance between the need for the creativity but the need for efficacy?
Yeah, I mean, this is another one that's massively important. Like if you want, when we talk about the 80% of levers for increasing your LTVs and decreasing CAC, it's creative is a big piece of that, especially now as the algorithms have gotten much better. But one, I think, huge mistake that people make is they assume that the creatives can't possibly understand the data, and they keep it from them. And so they're like, oh, I don't like it. Give me more stuff. And that drives creatives insane. Also, creating ads for paid media. And was your question around paid media generally or also product related? Okay. Well, quick note, creating ads sucks and no creative wants to do it. It's the worst work on the planet. And the worst thing, like they'll never put any of it in their portfolio, so they have to break that. But I think you go back to the data, you level that up and you say, here's what we're seeing. We have thoughts. What do you think? Where do you think we could like improve this? And there are like any number of things that could lead to that. So from a product marketing standpoint, that could be, I mean, if you're talking about gaming, that could be anything from like in-product Fatui stuff and onboarding and like what the UI looks like. It could be all the way down to like a push notification and like what are we leveraging there. It could of course bleed into social and other stuff like that, like paid media. But I think it's involving. This gets them back into the table, letting them have a voice there, trusting their guidance and like their expertise as creatives, letting them kind of divine what the truth is alongside data people where everybody is wrong. Like none of us can predict the future. So let's put some ideas. Let's level up the ones that we want to test first, run those, lick our wounds, go again. And you do that in every part of the business over and over and over again. But that's the same thing. It's getting the right teams in the room and trusting their expertise.
And games are, obviously art and science. And so I don't know if this is still a saying at Riot. Cody, you can tell us the idea of being data informed, I think is...
They're a little more data driven, but they're still data informed is still kind of the core ethos. Yeah.
The idea of being data informed, I think, is really important. Where you have the data and you can share that, transparently as a team, and then the team can decide whether the designers or other parts of the team what to actually do with the data, and do they implement changes based on the data, and are you going to test different options based on what you're learning? And so, to me, that's a really important facet, because you don't necessarily know if the design change is going to have the exact movement that you want on the data until you try it. And so ultimately it is through experimentation, but you got to obviously make sure you're balancing the two.
Cool. Like 5 o'clock, so maybe in like a couple more minutes. Who's in charge of this event? Because I am just here talking on a microphone. All right, we're going to take a couple more questions. How about that on executive decision? So question right here. Question right. Yes.
Thanks, guys. I have a question for Doe. I really love your insights on how important it is to think of the brand initially, like the Northern Star. And my question is, how much do you believe that your audience or the community can make influence on the brand's identity for your game?
I think it absolutely has to be successful. The audience. So just to recap, how can the community influence and how should they influence the brand identity? And I think that's why I like to start with a new product with minimal viable brand, because you have a set of hypotheses and what you want to put out into the world. And of course, you're building a very specific product, but you have to learn as you go, and you're influenced by all of the feedback you get along the way. And in Brawl, for instance, we even had the community help influence the world, the IP of the game, because we wanted the community to really feel like, back to being co-owners of the game, we wanted them to feel like that they were helping to kind of build this world with us. And so I think ultimately, modern games and modern products, have some aspect of that. Now, of course, it's very different depending on the type of product. If it's an open world game that has a very defined storyline, that's a bit different. But still, that you want the community to give you input as you go and take that into account and adapt your positioning and brand over time.
The one thing to be careful, though, is that, if you ever work with a consumer insights company, they'll tell you this, is people can't tell you what they want. They can only react to what you show them. And so if you are going to solicit community feedback, you have to do it in a way where you're giving them like 3 choices. So there's something called the paradox of choice. Don't show someone 10 things and ask them to pick no more than 3 things. There's called the rule of 3s. Your brain only processes things kind of in pockets of 3. 4, it explodes your mind. And so if you're going to show them a logo, if you're going to show them characters, if you're going to show them colors, make sure that it's something that all 3 choices you are happy with, and then have them react to that. You can do a lot of free surveys. You can do Google Typeform, all these different things, put it in your community. That can be really valuable to allow you to test. And obviously then you can do A/B testing and do paid media to go even broader. So hopefully that was helpful.
There's actually an old example related to this about spaghetti sauce. So imagine if you asked a group of people, would they like mushrooms in their spaghetti sauce if they've never had mushrooms in their spaghetti sauce before? Almost everyone would say no. But when they actually tested mushrooms in the spaghetti sauce and let the different consumers try it, people really liked it. And that became one of the most popular spaghetti sauces that sold. So I'll pull it out.
The Henry Ford. No one would have asked. People would have asked for a faster horse. No one would ever said, "I want a car." Or the iPod. Everyone here is. Do you remember the iPod? Like no one said like I dated myself first with the Henry Ford example, and I keep going.
Yeah. Talk about spaghetti sauce.
I'll give one other quick note on that, which is like your brand and your culture are always evolving, right? And as you grow, you get to 100 people, you get to 1,000 people, you're going to be a different company, no matter how hard you try to hold on to that. And you have to make the decision on how much you want to follow your core users. They're of course going to influence it, but at some point you're making a claim there, and you don't want to. You run the risk of becoming beholden to your audience sometimes, and you see this with really passionate groups. So at Blizzard, like once we gave away a coupon code and immediately got destroyed because they're like, I didn't get the coupon code, and it was like a marketing test. And was like, fuck you guys, I hate this, I should have gotten the coupon code. And you're like, okay, like we were just trying to do something fun, and it can blow back. So you have to kind of balance that, but it's ultimately a question for your team to say, like, what do we want to be? And you look at all these examples. I don't know, I'm thinking of Ozempic, but Ozempic's like diabetes medicine. So they're like, we're going to solve diabetes. And at some point they're like, nope, we're totally different mission, totally different everything. So as you pivot, as your game evolves, as everything evolves, as you add a second title, third title, that's going to have to morph, and it's your call to decide how much you want to let your audience influence that, but it'll happen naturally either way.
And one thing, an extension beyond that on brand is that what we've seen recently is like everybody had this assumption for many years that brand and performance are like 2 different things, right? And for by and large, that was definitely true. And I don't necessarily believe that to be the case today or into the future. I think brand ultimately drives performance. Creative drives performance, but that's coming from your brand. So when you build it from the ground up, Ultimately, if you're going to operate a marketing program and do it successfully, the assets from the brand ultimately bleed into the performance, and ultimately they're interdependent upon one another. And I don't think anybody should be looking at it like these are two different worlds anymore. I think they're colliding, and I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Thank you.
Questions? You guys want to tag team?
Thanks for the answers. It's very helpful.
Thank you for the question.
Okay. So hi guys, I'm Shaquita. My company is Shiro Games. I wanted to know, like, I used to work with Coca-Cola. I used to do sales and marketing for them. We used to act like Pepsi didn't exist. In the gaming world, you can't really do that because it's so saturated. There's so many people. What is like something that you found that's been really effective for your company and making you stand out amongst the crowd? Is there anything that you can give us advice on?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say for Riot, luckily, I mean, they picked this long before I was there, so it's actually part of why I joined, is they're truly dedicated to the idea of player experience first, right? And so that was the position they wanted to take really, really early. They kind of pioneered free-to-play in a weird way back when it first came out. And I have been in the room multiple times with executives where something that would be very revenue positive is presented, and they're like, nope, that feels like shit for a player, not doing it. And so, like, knowing what you want to differentiate with and actually sticking to it, as long as it's actually resonating with your audience, right? If no player actually cared that we did that and they're like, no, gotcha, give me loot boxes all day, then we might be like, okay, I guess they don't care if we don't do pay for power or something like that, but they do care, so we stick to it. So it's find that differentiator that actually fits with you, like what you want your company to be, and your audience will stick with it.
I actually think ChatGPT is fantastic at this. And so I was honestly, one of my clients, I was like, if you could do this homework for me, is who do you think your competitors are? Put them all into ChatGPT and ask them these questions. What is their positioning? What is their differentiation? Help me understand their key features. And it does a really good job of telling you, and then tell it about you. And then ask it to compare that to you. And this will just accelerate your knowledge, because the one thing that you have to do is identify your elevator pitch of what is it about you that makes you unique and differentiated against all the other games. And I'm sure you'll be able to come up with it. But that's the key. And so that's a quick tool that can really help you, is understanding your competitive set and what sets you apart from them.
I think the consistency is also really important, and also accepting that you are whatever people think you are. So you can do as much as you can to be consistent and hope that gets through. But if you take, again, like a quick example from like a Zynga slots title. I don't play slots. I don't really like slots, but I was running the media for it. And so we were talking to really high value payers. These are 100 plus a year, 100K plus a year, huge players. And we're trying to understand, why do you do this? What do you like about this? And so I, of course, like, I'm testing games all the time, and I loved some of our competitors' mini games. So when you hit some jackpot, you get to play some follow the peanut game, or you have to do some other thing. And I liked those, right? And so I asked like a bunch of these people, and there was about 20 of them. I'm like, what do you think of our mini games? Because I'm like, are mini games good? And they're like, well, I hate mini games. I'm like, you hate our mini games? No, I hate all mini games. I'm like, what do you hate about the mini games? It's not slots. Oh, okay. Well, why do you pick our game over other people's games? The music. I'm like, you put the music on? Okay. And it's like, I like the animation when I win, and I can't possibly understand that because I don't share that same experience. And so I'm like, okay, mini games suck, music matters, big win moments matter. We're going to make really big win moments even splashier, and like, we're going to invest in music and fuck the mini games, right? And so whatever I think it is always going to be different. So it's just keeping that pulse and being consistent. King, you know King art when you see it, you know Supercell art when you see it. So this kind of comes back to that culture and kind of like calling your shot and being consistent.
Yeah, just make sure that you know that know who your audience is, and if you're the audience, awesome, then you know what to do. But if you're not the audience, then make sure you know what they want. Like, on the podcast, I was like, "Oh, Match Factory is not going to work because it stresses me out. I don't like games that make me feel time pressure. However, there are so many games, Diner Dash, that throughout time have been successful with time pressure. And so I was like, crap. It's not about me. It's about, are they doing this for the audience that cares about? And they did, and they're winning. And so that's the other piece is really understand. And you can ask ChatGPT that too.
I actually have a very interesting story to tell everybody about this, because this is like kind of unique. I think it was 2008. I was in Hamburg for Casual Connect, actually, which rest in peace, great show, but that's no longer with us. But I was in Hamburg, and I actually met Robert Anticol, who is the CEO of Playtika and the founder of it. Okay, Slotomania. This is right when it was starting, and he told me we were doing a business deal with him, and he said I'm going to be above Zynga day one, and I'm like, that's not possible. This is when Zynga was starting to really, they were huge at that point. I'm like, that's not possible. Come on, and I shook my head. It's not possible, and he told me why. And what you said, Jen, about knowing your audience, he understood the psychology of a slots player, okay? When he's like, well, what is your definition of a slots player? What's the demographic? And I'm like, I didn't want to say exactly what a lot of people might suggest, but it's like, hey, look, there's, potentially females like in, 25 to 45 years of age in the United States in these, in these regions. And he's like, why do you think, and this is a free-to-play game. You can't win money, right? But he's like, no, it's the psychology of a slots player. What's the psychology of a slots player? It's not about winning, because hardly do you ever win playing slots in Vegas or Jersey, right? But it's about pulling the reel and seeing the lights go and seeing the sound go. And it's like it's just like basically it's consumption, it's repetition, it's enthusiasm. It's a drawn of like they're just into that kind of like method. They're into that kind of like consumption. Let's put it that way. They never win, but or maybe they do, but most don't. The house wins. But that was just them doing that for hours because they really appreciated that, and that was the psychology of them. And he basically knew that right at the outcome. Coming from Israel, that would make sense because they knew this really well. And day one, it went past Zynga, and he was absolutely right. But that's a very good, first of all, about slots. I thought you might find that interesting. But at the same time, guys, that's knowing your audience. That's knowing the psychology of your user. And ultimately, I think if you have a really good sense of hit like he does, you will be successful.
Yeah, it's also the dark arts because it's mildly addictive too. But thank you for your question. Hopefully we're helpful. I'm going to wrap it up because I think we're past time. So thank you all for coming. This is a great audience. Come find us after, and thank you for coming, guys.